As a cafe that brings together coffee and food, it is a top priority to make consistently delicious coffee. At a cafe like Sowers Harvest, where we have good equipment and delicious fresh roasted coffee, it's up to the barista to make sure to learn the skills and knowledge necessary to be producing that consistently delicious coffee every single time. A barista that understands what happens in coffee extraction can quickly make adjustments to their technique to extract coffee better. So what is coffee extraction? Coffee extraction happens when you take a coffee bean and grind it down to increase its surface area and expose that increased surface area to a solvent like water and a energy such as heat and maybe pressure in the case of espresso. What happens is as the flavor compounds begin to extract, the first ones are the lighter compounds like acids and salts. And as it progresses, the heavier compounds begin to extract as well, such as sugars. And then towards the end of the extraction process, you're getting bitter compounds like polyphenols. If you extract coffee for all it's worth, taking all that full 28% of the total dissolvable solids, or the TDS, out of the coffee, you end up with coffee that is over-extracted and tastes harsh and bitter. If you do the opposite of that and stop the extraction too early, you will end up with coffee that is really sharp and sour and weirdly salty as well. So the goal for a barista is always to be extracting coffee as evenly as possible, pushing it up through that extraction zone to as much extraction as possible before you hit that over extraction threshold. In a perfect world, you could extract all of these flavor compounds evenly from every single particle of coffee. But because coffee doesn't grind completely evenly. When you grind coffee, some of it will be very small pieces, some of it will be very large pieces, and then most of it's going to be around the size you want. So like a good coffee grinder, the curve is going to look something like this of the different size particle distribution. A bad coffee grinder is just going to be much more rounded. And so you're going to have a much broader range of particle size distribution. So what happens with that is that the smaller pieces of coffee will extract much quicker than the big pieces of coffee. And you'll have, from the small pieces of coffee, you'll get a lot of bitterness, and from the large pieces of coffee, you're going to get a lot of sourness. And so you end up with a very confusing and not very good cup of coffee. So a good coffee grinder will go a long way into helping getting good, even extraction from the grounds themselves. The next big culprit for poor extraction is when the coffee itself is unevenly exposed to the solvent. In drip coffee, this often happens when a stream of water is directed into one spot of the coffee bed. Another way this happens is through channeling, when there's a defect in the bed itself that allows water to pass through more easily there. Water will always take the path of least resistance through the coffee bed. And this phenomenon is even more noticeable in espresso because of dealing with high pressures. So what happens is the coffee puck, there will be a little soft spot there, and the water will force a little hole through. And that spot will extract much more coffee from that single spot, and you'll get over-extracted coffee from there and under-extracted coffee from the rest of the coffee bed. And what happens is you actually get a lower total extraction, but because of that over extraction in the one spot, it will taste very bitter but also sour as well. So a barista can mitigate these problems through good techniques. So what does a barista do to ensure that they have consistently delicious coffee throughout the day? Well, a lot of it comes down to good puck prep when pulling shots of espresso. So let's just go ahead and do one, and I'll walk you through it. So you always want to be consistent. So always purge the machine before pulling your next shot. And then when it comes to great coffee and great espresso, it's all about getting a really level, even coffee bed that the so that the puck that the water just comes straight down through. So one way of doing that is shaking to level like that. That's pretty good. And in a cafe situation, that would probably be my recommendation. The best way, though, is with what's known as a Weiss distribution tool or a WDT. And what you do is you just dig down in the coffee bed and slowly do circles, little circles within circles, like that. Just slowly declumping everything, getting all the clumps out. And as you're circling around like that, you slowly work up through the bed, getting closer and closer to the top. And so you can just prep that very top and get everything beautifully even and nice and ready to tamp. So I actually don't recommend using a bed leveler. That just changes the top of the bed, and it actually doesn't affect the bottom parts of the bed. So it won't actually help much with channels. So there's been some research done, and actually using a bed leveler will be less overall extraction than simply shaking it. Give it a little tap. And then for tamping, good tamping form is very important. What you want to do is you want to square your hips to the bar table itself, and then you want to get your arms in a straight plane. That way, your arm is like a piston moving up and down, straight wrist, and just imagine that it's a piston pushing straight, levelly into that puck. And then you don't have to press very hard, just about 20 pounds of pressure, and it's done. I like to twist it to just make sure it comes free without any suction. And then you get a beautifully, beautifully level tamp. I actually could have done a little bit better job, it looks like, on this one. It's maybe a little higher right here. Let's pull our shot. Hmm. Yeah, that looked pretty good. Um, I saw a little bit of channeling, but it wasn't too bad. Let's taste it. Hmm. Yeah. I can taste it all across my tongue. The sweetness is balancing out this acidity, and the bitterness and the acidity are working together. It's a great shot. In the search for consistently delicious coffee, it should be no surprise that one of the best tools that a barista has in their toolbox is their sense of taste. A well-refined sense of taste can allows a barista to quickly distinguish between under-extracted coffee or over-extracted coffee or even uneven extracted coffee. This allows them to know how to change the brewing parameters to address those issues. A really great way of honing your ability to taste things like under extraction and over extraction or even uneven extraction is a technique that's known as the salami shot. And what the salami shot is taking a normal shot of espresso and splitting it into different segments over the course of the of pulling the shot. We're going to do 3 segments today, but you could do it where you pull a manual shot and go all the way up to 7, just to really taste the entire range of under extraction through over extraction. So the way you do it is you pull a normal shot of espresso and then you just capture the first 10 seconds of the shot. And then as the shot progresses, you can either capture every 5 seconds or every 10 seconds. We're going to just do every 10 seconds today. All right, so here's our salami shot. Let's go ahead and taste it. This is the first one. Oh, oh, oh yeah. Very sour, very salty, very intense. The second one, yeah, still definitely sour. Not nearly as intense, but still has a lot of those under extracted characteristics of sourness. But it now has a bit more sweetness into it and a little bit more balance. And this is the final one. Oh yeah. So this one very lacks a lot of flavor. Doesn't have near the intensity of the other two shots. Quite a bit sweeter, but just doesn't have flavor. If you would combine these, the flavors would balance each other out. This would give it the other sweetness and dial back that intensity, and the others would give it bring up the acidity and give it some life and character and make it a delicious tasting shot of espresso. Another really great way of training your taste buds is purposefully pulling a really uneven shot of espresso. So instead of just making your coffee bed nice and flat and level and tamping it with good form and tamping it nice and level, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an unlevel tamp and I'm going to make a big old divot in the coffee bed as well, just to get a really uneven extraction. Then I'm also going to hold the coffee cup up next to it because I don't want to get coffee all over me because of the bottomless portafilters. All right, so let's taste it. Mm. Mhm. Yeah, that's actually not as bad as I might have expected. Um, it it just mostly tastes under extracted to me, and that makes sense because the water is mostly just bypassing the coffee through the chan by just going through the channel. So it's kind of weak and watery, and but there is a very distinct bitterness on the back of my tongue. In summary, I just want to reiterate that the goal of a barista is always to extract as much as possible, as evenly as possible, from the coffee before hitting that over extraction threshold. If you do that, you can extract consistently delicious coffee every single time. Here's your double shot of espresso.
Sure thing.
Mm.